I'm Terry Shepard. Being a confident podcast guest is a skill that can be learned. And that's why I wrote How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. It's a sweet and short primer that teaches you about the gear, the appearance, and the messaging that can grab and hold today's micro attention spans and motivate your listeners to take action. How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. The digital version is just $1.99 at Amazon. Grab your copy today and sell more books tomorrow.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Today's guest has lived a life shaped by ambition, talent, and the quiet cost of success. Craig Yorke grew up in the tough Boston neighborhood and climbed all the way to one of the most demanding arenas in medicine, the world of neurosurgery. Along the way, he made choices that closed some doors and opened others. He was a gifted violinist who once shared the stage with the Boston Pops, yet he chose the operating room over the concert hall. He built a long career far from the coasts, practicing medicine in the heart of Middle America while wrestling with the expectations, history, and identity he carried with him. His new memoir, Steep, is not just a story of professional achievement. It is a deeply human reflection of what it takes to rise, what it costs to keep climbing, and how a life slowly matures over time. Craig Yorke, welcome to the conversation. Great to be with you.
Thank you for having me. What an introduction, my goodness.
What made you choose the violin?
I didn't. My parents imposed it on me when I was 6. I didn't want to play, and that was entirely irrelevant. It was part of a project to make me more acceptable to the white world. I really did not want to practice at all, but I did. I was obedient. And I peaked early in a way. I played with the Boston Pops when I was 16, a soloist. Then I got to college, and it was the 1960s, and I felt like the violin was eating my life. And I put it away for 35 years and picked it up again when I left the OR. I was about 54 years old. And it had changed. My whole relationship with it had changed. I began to see it as an emblem of parental love, an emblem of work for them, kind of the closest thing that I have to a family heirloom.
What do you think they wanted for you?
They had been wounded by racism in Boston in the early decades of the 20th century. And they treated those wounds by forging their unexpected son into a weapon. I was to be their weapon against the pain of their experience, kind of a shield against being patronized, being ridiculed, and so forth. So I was kind of embedded, enclosed in layers of armor, one layer of credentials after another.
And was the move to medicine part of that journey as well?
A bit. I got to college wanting to get away from my nerdish past, but a combination of circumstances, the war, the draft, led me to be in the natural sciences. And I came to really love the nervous system and wanted to be a top gun, wanted to be the best of the best. So I launched into a career, a residency in neurosurgery, without really knowing what neurosurgeons did all day. It was just a combination of blind ambition and and love for the nervous system. I mean, I spent a little time with them at critical moments, and neurosurgeons had to write stuff. They could raise the dead. So, hey, listen, are you hearing any feedback from me or not?
No, you sound great.
Okay, good.
You sound great. And your echo cancellation is on. So it's coming to be absolutely perfect. Is there feedback that's distracting you?
Oh, I'll be all right. I'll be all right. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, that was how I got into medicine in a way. I mean, I did research in the nervous system. I made a little bit of a name for myself. I was working at a hospital. I was around physicians. My parents were, let's say, supportive of the idea of becoming a doctor. So that's kind of the way I was directed.
Many of my guests say that writing is therapeutic for unanswered questions from their past. Is that part of the motivation for the book Steep?
That's a really, really good question. The answer is yes, of course. It's the cheapest therapy you'll ever get if it's done well. But no, it began as a letter to our sons. If you've ever gone to a Thanksgiving dinner or a family reunion, there are subjects that just never seem to come up. And I wanted to talk about what their dad was like, what had formed him. And then I had just an amazing moment in Washington, D.C. I was in line to get into the Black Smithsonian, the National Museum of African American and Culture and History. And over the entrance, there's a quote from James Baldwin that just stopped me in my tracks. The great force of history is that it lives inside us, controls us unconsciously. And I just stood there and I thought, this guy is speaking directly to me. How did he know? And so I got to work. I started to write, and one thing led to another. And, there was another moment. I was standing in a major bookstore looking at the Black Studies shelf. And I saw books of incredible scholarship, bulletproof reasoning, just exquisite books like the 1619 Project. But then I thought, now, wait a minute. Where is the place here for one guy from Roxbury, Massachusetts, who's in Topeka, Kansas? And furthermore, I thought these books are heavily diagnostic. They're saying, this went wrong, that went wrong, this is terrible, this is horrible, this is miserable, but not a lot of remedy. And I stood there and I thought, well, all of us are always trying to adapt to the situations we find ourselves in. And there's nothing about that in these books. There's nothing about what you do after you've done the petition, after you've done the march. What do you do? And so I thought, well, maybe I can write a little book that can extend that Black Studies shelf half an inch and can bring in more folks, because my story is hardly unique. There's a lot of folks that, Ukrainians and Malaysians, and all kinds of folks have an experience like mine.
Our special guest is Craig Yorke. His book is Steep. His website is Craig, Yorke, CraigYorke.com.
It's complex.
As men, we all, no matter what our background or cultural heritage, have a very rough time navigating adolescence. How was it different for you being a man of color?
Well, it was us against the world. I grew up in a bunker. We were in Boston and so forth. And there's a lot written about the talk that Black fathers had with their sons about the police. And my dad had that talk with me, but it really wasn't relevant because my life was so regimented. I went to an unbelievably competitive public high school, and I was gone from home to go to the subway about 6:30 each morning, came back in the middle of the afternoon, practiced the fiddle until dinner, and then studied until bed. And I did that for 6 years. So I became kind of an adult at age 12, and that's in the book. And I didn't have a childhood, so to speak. So it was a strange, I was an only child, and my parents didn't expect me. So I was heavily scrutinized. And the three of us were fused. The three of us were very much a unit. Almost too much so, I'd say.
What did neurosurgery teach you?
Well, it taught me a number of things. First, that a lot of the people I was working with had come to the field as I had with something to prove. How smart they were, how deft they were, and so forth. Second, I learned that the general population oftentimes views neurosurgeons and others as shamans, that we have magic, that we can do anything. I learned also that neurosurgery there's a lot of manual labor in neurosurgery. Taking part of somebody's skull off is not a very intellectual task. But I also learned, I really got an amazing education about how to live and how to die, because neurosurgeons are right at the bedside at those amazing moments when people come back to life, or when the family gets the worst news they could ever receive. And that sort of experience isn't available to accountants or to lawyers. That experience is potent, and I had it. I hope I didn't miss too much of the meaning of that experience.
How would you define the essence of healing?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know that we're ever fully healed. We move from one illness to another, and hopefully we solve problems as we march through this vale of tears.
Have you found some peace as a result of your writing?
I have. I'm by no means liberated. The path to liberation is, shall we say, steep. But the work of the writing has shown me the trailhead on that path. I should say quickly that the word steep is on purpose. It is an adjective and a verb. The adjective is David Brooks' first mountain of, college and achievement and career and all that. The second mountain is steep as verb, steeping oneself, steeping one's experience, steeping one's life, to figure out what it means and what kind of human being you are, what kind of citizen you are. So I began that second journey when I left the OR, when I was 54.
And that took you back to music?
It's true. My wife, the love of my life, when I was about 55, said, "Why don't you sell that violin? You never play it." And I thought, oh my goodness. The violin came to me when I was 11. And my teacher had said, this kid can play well enough that he deserves an instrument that costs $1,000. And my parents almost had a stroke. I mean, $1,000, like $1 million. But they raised it. And, like I say, it's now like a little heirloom. And I think of them when I play it each morning. And I don't play it like I used to. I mean, I am the oldest member of the Topeka Symphony Orchestra, I should say. And it's a very good orchestra, actually. But yeah, the violin has a whole different personality than it did when I was 20 or 25.
Aside from having to rebuild your calluses, was it at all like riding a bicycle to take up the instrument again?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that my wife, Mary, must have had invisible earbuds because the first year was like a cat being disemboweled. I mean, it was just, my muscles were good. The muscle memory, the training had been so severe that my muscle memory was okay. But my intonation, my phrasing was just brutal. It's better now.
How do you think you got it back?
Time and attention, and oddly enough, by trying less hard. Less muscle mass, less muscle contraction. If your technique is good, really yields tremendous results for me. I mean, I tried way too hard as a kid.
Is there a parallel in that lesson to life?
Well, I think so. Yeah. I mean, just being present in the moment and then relaxing. I mean, easy to say, but there's power in that. There really is.
We're talking with Craig Yorke. His book is Steep, and the website is craigyorke.com. What are some of the takeaways that you hope readers will take with them from their encounter with the book?
Okay. I'm going to start with a confrontation that I had with our younger son. He was about 14 years old. And big guy. I'm 6'1". He's like 6'4" already. And I'm in his face telling him what to do. And he gets right up to me and he says, "Dad, do not tell me what to do. Tell me what you did." And that ended the conversation. So Steep is a series of vignettes from 77 years. And it's what I did. But if you push me, I would say the takeaway is to think about how you relate to the past and how you relate to your past. Are you unconsciously controlled by it? Or do you have a sliver of liberation? Do you have a sliver of freedom? And for me, the way to get to that sliver of freedom was to use my memory actively, to look hard at what I didn't want to look at. And as I got more friendly with that, as I snuggled up to it, it lost some of its power. And I got a little bit freed from it, a little bit. So that would be my takeaway, to use your memory and tell your story. Your story might be a phone call. Your story might be a letter. Your story might be a talk over coffee. It might even be a book. But that would be my sense of the takeaway, I guess.
We become our parents to a certain degree when it's our turn to raise children. Oh. How did you raise your boys differently?
Well, I tried to take my finger off the scales and not be as relentless with them as my parents had been with me. That was hard because they faced different challenges. They were the sons of the local neurosurgeon. And I'll just say that affluence brings its own problems, different from poverty, but affluence brings its own problems. I was seldom the bad guy. My wife was often the bad guy. I was tired or timid or whatever. But I will say that the greatest or the best evidence that I have that I'm a good citizen is our sons. And my biggest regret is they refused to let me boast about them in my book. Mary, my wife, and they had edits on the book, and they said, "This is your book. You don't be bragging on us. Just tell your story." So, but I will, now that we're here and they're not here. They are incredible citizens. They are much better dads than I ever was. I don't know, they were both art majors in college, and they've made their way in ways that have astonished me. I mean, they look like corporate warriors, but they are not. They're admirable young men in every sense.
How did that happen?
It's a mystery to me. It's all. I'd like to think that I showed up each day. A lot of the time, neurosurgery was hungry for my attention. My body would show up, though. I'd get to the soccer practices and the parent-teacher conferences and so forth. But I think probably it's their mother. I mean, I bet it's Mary, large part of it. But
How did you meet her?
Oh boy, I was a fumbling junior resident in a neurosurgery residency at UC San Francisco, elite residency. And she was probably the best physical therapist at the university hospital there. And we met over a kid named Jimmy Friggle. And Jimmy Friggle had a very rare, fatal neurodegenerative disease that left him incredibly spastic and so forth. And Mary was there to help with getting him mobilized. And I was there to try to figure out what my professor of neurosurgery was going to do brain electrodes to try to reduce his muscle spasms. So that's where we met. And we were entirely professional for a year or two in San Francisco. We were both living in Haight-Ashbury, by the way. It's a neighborhood that's well known.
I know it well. Yes.
Yeah, she was on Stanton Street and I was on Willard, just up from what used to be Kezar Stadium.
What do you think the attraction was for her?
I think I was different from the other residents. I knew how ignorant I was, and I had time to teach. She was a beauty from Montana. And the two of us had come from entirely different worlds. My world just teemed with enemies. And she was the most open, optimistic person that I knew. Plus, she was, of course, incredibly great looking. So I don't know. I guess she was attracted to my scholarship. I mean, I took her seriously, first of all. She would ask great questions, and I wouldn't be dismissive. I would say, well, whatever I knew, I would share. And I think she appreciated that.
It seems we can never escape this world full of enemies. I always hope with every generation that we'll make a little progress, and then it feels like we fall backwards.
Yeah, that's true.
What hope is there out there for our future?
Oh, I don't know. I think that we just have to keep marching along. I mean, I'm reading a book right now called An Unfinished Love Affair, and it's written by Doris Kearns Goodwin about her relationship with Dick Goodwin. And Mary aimed it at me because she knew that Doris Kearns had been my TA in freshman American history. And as you read about the 1960s, you see that, the world is always going to hell in a handbasket. You just have to understand that and persist in the face of what's very unfavorable situations.
You and I have both lived long lives, and we've witnessed an awful lot of things that have happened.
Yeah.
What does that rearview mirror give you as wisdom, if any?
Well, the past has a lot of power if you let it. But if you use your memory, you can get some liberation. Let me just stop here and say one thing that's missing from the book are a few lines at the end that my publisher, Thea Rademacher, wouldn't let me put in. It's lines from a favorite poet of mine, unlikely guy from St. Louis, Missouri, named T.S. Eliot. And in his poem Four Quartets, he says, this is the use of memory for liberation, not less of love, but the expanding of love beyond desire. And so liberation from the past and the future also. So he was talking about expanding love beyond craving. My team's got to win. I've got to get this car. I've got to, and that perspective combined with the rear view mirror has been helpful to me. Expanding your love beyond your cravings.
Why do you think your publisher kept that out? That's very powerful.
It is powerful. She said that Eliot's family had all of his work in a trust, and it would take us more time than I had to get permission to use the lines. I finished the book with kind of an awkward, well, I won't say awkward, a pretty good prose rendering of the idea. But I would have liked to use the lines.
We can save that for the second edition.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
How do you want Craig Yorke to be remembered?
Good citizen, good dad, somebody who, this is pure plagiarism, did what he could with what he had. And that comes from the tombstone of Thurgood Marshall. Somebody who did what he could with what he had. We came, Mary and I, to an unlikely place. We drove from San Francisco to Topeka in the hottest weather I've ever known in June of 1980. And we put together an honorable life in an unlikely place.
Is there a question that I have not asked you that you wish that I had?
Oh, well, this is audio, so I always want people to ask me about the cover. But
the cover looks like a QR code from a distance. What is it?
It's a pen and ink drawing of a brain cell that revolutionized medicine. It echoes what the Kansas State motto is, ad astra per aspera, to the stars through difficulties. It was done by a guy who was a juvenile delinquent, and everybody gave up on this guy. He grew up south of Madrid. His name was Ramon y Cajal. And he became an anatomist. And in 1895, you didn't have photography of the slides you were looking at. So he did pen and ink drawings. And in 1902, he went to Mecca. He went to London, the Royal Society. And he said, you gentlemen are all wrong about how the brain is put together. It's not an infinite network. It's actually put together with a large number of independent cells. Our microscopes are too weak to show the separations between them, but my imagination tells me that they're there. And my imagination also tells me that these cells all communicate with each other electrically. And my imagination, my sense of these drawings is that the shape of these cells changes as an organism learns and ages. Now, the usual end to that story is that the people in London throw the guy out of the room and he's never heard from again. But the opposite happened. He basically invented neuroscience that day. And 2 years later, he became the only anatomist ever to win the Nobel Prize for medicine. And these cells, every one of us, it's a moment of unity because every one of us has 15 million of these cells. And they sit in a tight formation at the back of the brain and they restrain us. What they do is restrain excessive muscle tension. You think, why is that important? Well, if you want to pick up a cup of coffee and not throw it over yourself, if you want to write a letter, if you want the muscles of your eyes to track across a line of print, you can't do that without these cells. So the cover, let's just say that the cover sets a high standard for what's in the book.
What is in your imagination right now?
Oh, my goodness. I'm going to go see my grandkids, my grandsons on Friday in Seattle, and hopefully see the other grandsons in Brooklyn sometime soon.
How does being a grandpa make you feel? How is it different from being a parent?
Oh, it's just pure delight. I mean, we have worries, of course. I worry about whether they'll be able to move far enough north to avoid the problems of climate in their lifetime. I have my worries, but my goodness, they're such glorious little human beings. I mean, what can I say? Don't get me started.
The book is steep. It's a very profound and moving memoir from our special guest, Craig Yorke. You can learn more about him at Craig Yorke, Yorke, CraigYorke.com. Dr. Yorke, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Professor Shepard.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.